Overall, Arsenal are a weird team. Despite only losing once this season, there's been an unnerving annoyance by the fan base about how the team are playing and the results that they have had in games they have won, which I do think is fair enough. Now, one player that could hopefully be a solution could be Nwaneri, and in this video we look at exactly how his performance against Port Vale shows he is good enough to play in these big games, so let's get into it. Now, we're not going to go into all of the details about Arsenal's performances recently, and I do think ultimately Arsenal have been playing well. We have still been winning, which is fair enough, but I do think that a lot of the fans are right to be annoyed about the way we are playing, especially when it's not getting them results against City, against Liverpool already this season, with Newcastle away coming up, a place that we always lose at under Arteta. Now, Nwaneri has not played enough this season in my opinion. He has come off the bench a couple of times for Odegaard being injured against smaller teams, but has not been trusted in the big games where Arteta has favoured someone like Marino over him, which I know has annoyed a lot of the fan base. Now, our creativity against Port Vale wasn't better, let's be honest. It was still very much like Arsenal had the handbrake on and didn't really go for it unless it was the first 10 to 15 minutes and the last 10 to 15 minutes, which is the norm. And ultimately, it felt like Arsenal against a League One side at least should have some fun playing football, which kind of derived from the team after the first 20 minutes when we got the lead. Now, in this game, obviously, Arteta ended up playing Ethan and Eze as dual 10s, dual 8s, if you could say. And ultimately, I think it did work in different ways. Eze managed to get the first goal when he was inside, which he hasn't been out on the width. And Nwaneri was really able to dictate, especially in the first half, from all over the pitch. And even when it came deeper, I don't think he struggled as much as maybe Arteta thought or some people thought. And I think he was a very good game overall from him and Eze in mind. Now, looking at his heat map overall in the game, Ethan was playing as a 10 right-sided player. As you can see, that's where he picked up the most touches, but also as a deeper player like we mentioned. He was kind of playing this hybrid 8/10 role, which Arsenal really have missed a two-way player with Odegaard not being in the team, and it gave Arsenal, I think, a little bit more in them areas which we really liked, and I think in the first half we got to saw that a little bit more. Now, something I like about Nwaneri as a player is we've spoken about it before, but when he's in tighter areas, he is someone that picks the ball up and goes with it, very much like Max Dowman, maybe not as quick as Max, but is someone that always has that incentive to go forward. Now, in these sort of tighter areas, this is where I've had some real problems with Odegaard in the past. Not because Odegaard isn't a good dribbler or can't go past players, which we know he can. The problem is with Odegaard is when he stops, let's say from a miscontrol or a mistake or a little foot in by the defender, it completely slows the attack down. Everyone has to stop to a standstill because then Odegaard will just calmly place the ball around. He hasn't got that urgency anymore that he used to have. Now, with Nwaneri, because he has this change of pace and acceleration out of nowhere, if he messes up a touch, if he messes up some of his play, he is able to continue to go and just go past that player. In these pockets that he kept going into, I felt like in the first half, he was just creating all the time. Not only is he a guy that in this right half space, you've got to worry about shooting from there because we know how good he is, but he's someone that can find passes through, he can work with players around him, and he is starting to get a much better relationship. I think with the right side being White and Saka helped a lot more. I think their attacking work was really good when they actually tried, and it always gave him slight options around him to create. And overall, Nwaneri down this right hand side, I think in the attack gave us a different option because he became that third man and actually made the triangle out there a lot better, I think. And there's a few times as well where Saka goes down the right, White comes inside, and Nwaneri gets that gap and runs into the box past the last defender, asking for the ball, getting that space and being able to get a shot away, which ends up getting a good block in this occasion. But there is also times he can do that more Odegaard style role, come deeper, turn on the ball, look up and give him options. He's not someone that always rushes things. Sometimes I want him to be a little bit quicker, but I do think he's quick overall. But he does have that Odegaard aspect of waiting, looking at a team in a block and trying to find runners and passes inside. If that doesn't work, he can always find the wingers, find Ben White quite a lot in this game and use them as an option, and then he will make an option happen. If a player's behind him, he will make that run instead because he knows he doesn't need to cover in that moment, which happened quite a lot with Norgard, which you can see they're definitely trying to feel each other out a bit. They've not played with each other much together. Now, what I will say is that I think even Nwaneri works incredibly well with Bukayo Saka, because I kind of think how they play off each other is a real partnership that can develop more than some of the other wingers that we have right now. Now, we all know Saka's best attribute, probably for the team, is his ability to hold off players, keep the ball, calm things down, and just never get tackled. In the end, he brings players out of the block, he drags players away, and you need players to run into that gap to create that space and basically have the chance to go through, which we just haven't had with Odegaard and other players around there. Now, Nwaneri loves doing this, and there's so many times that we mentioned he runs inside, but there's also so many times he carries the ball outside as well. There was a few times in this game where on counter-attacking situations, Saka would come back and help the team build up, and Nwaneri would take that space, being probably a 2v2 with White pushed up sometimes, maybe it was Marino, and he just takes it and moves into the area. And the main thing is he just never stops. You know, Ben White was passing the ball into him, the 1-2, and Nwaneri is so quick in these areas. He's not the quickest, but he's able to keep a good distance away from the defender, and then as soon as the defender comes at him, he's able to pass the ball across. And this wasn't the only time. This was more of a run-in motion where he sets up Marino and Marino messes it up. But there's also a few where Arsenal baited poor Vale in from the block deeper, and they managed to build up, I'd say, around the halfway line, maybe even a little bit deeper than that. And Nwaneri would be able to find central spaces by using his constant rotations in midfield, and then be able to put that pass through to a Saka, to a White, whoever's running through in that position. Now, I think this is something that Arsenal have missed from a counter-attacking perspective, and it's one of the big reasons why I spoke about Eze playing on that right side against Man City. He finds these gaps in this space, and I do think broadly Nwaneri's off the ball work much more used to the team than someone like Eze, especially on this right-hand side, so I think it works a little bit better. But he finds the gaps, he finds the spaces, and he is so quick on execution. Sometimes I think Nwaneri doesn't have maybe the passing level, and sometimes he might overhit passes, he might scuff them a little bit, but I broadly think he makes the right decision quite a lot of the time on the ball. And these moments where he can get out of the block, get the space in midfield, and get that ball into the counter should be something Arsenal are using in these games which we've been struggling in recently. Maybe not domination like Arteta wants to say in his press conference, but ultimately we didn't beat Man City, so that has to be taken and we have to improve. And the other reason why I think he can be really good in these positions for Arsenal to help them break is because we mentioned this a little bit with Eze in the game against Man City, but when he receives the ball just behind the defender, he can turn them very quickly and get out. Now, Marino is a player that can turn brilliantly well with the ball. He just takes 6 years to make a decision when he's got it. Now, that's not the same with Nwaneri. When you're trying to clear a ball, when teams are pressing you high and they're trying to go at you, he's a great player to ease that attack. You know, he holds players off, he turns with them and wins free kicks and gets the ball up. But the more important thing is that Nwaneri is a quote-unquote carrier more than a passer genuinely, and Arsenal haven't got that. He is someone that when he gets this space, he will run into it, and this is something Arsenal need for your player that is going to get you away from the block and on the counter even more. And the thing is, his little turns, his little dribbling and his agility is exceptional, and I know it's only Port Vale, but he's showed this quite a lot this season, that when he's in these really tight areas, there's about 2 or 3 players around him, he can keep the ball. There's a couple in this game where I think he's going to lose it guaranteed, and he just manages to juke his way through it and keep the ball or get a free kick for the team. This is something Marino cannot do. If you press Marino incredibly hard, he will have a situation in the midfield especially where he just loses the ball. Now, I will say with Nwaneri, there is definitely a certain level of his impact in the game isn't always there. He's not always on the ball. And I do think this season there's been much more examples of him coming a lot deeper, playing a bit more of an 8 role and coming out the block and even helping with build-up. There's many times in this game where he's coming up to the centre-backs and giving them an option, which I just don't think we really saw before, especially obviously when he was out on the wing. Now, he's still learning this much deeper play. I think genuinely on the ball, he's got a really good risk and reward system. There's a lot of times when he comes inside, and I kind of like him and Eze being a little bit more roamy with each other because I think that works really well. But Nwaneri in this game also has that ability from deep to put passes through to Saka, which we've been complaining about for ages, about this long pass through for the wingers and finding options deeper in the block, not necessarily always having to come outside it like an Odegaard. He can go inside because he has that pace and that dribbling ability, I think, better than Odegaard, which I think helps in these sort of tighter areas. He's also basically the same sort of shooter as Odegaard from outside the box. I think you could argue he's better. We haven't really seen it this season, but we've seen some of the goals he has scored for Arsenal over last year and they were incredible. So I think I like him, especially from his right half channel. And what I will say, my big caveat for all of this, I think one of the biggest issues I saw in the Port Vale game is sometimes he prepares for a physical challenge a little bit too much. Now what I mean by that is that, like we mentioned, he's incredibly good at using his body and keeping the ball, especially in dribbling centres centrally. But there's a few times where he's the last defender back, he's got the ball, he'll maybe mess a touch up or it not be in the position he wants it, and then he's already trying to hold off the ball. And I do think there's a few of them in this game which didn't get given that should have been fouls. There's one that he scored from, which definitely was a foul over Nwaneri, but you're not always going to get them. So having him as this deeper player, maybe even the deepest sometimes with the ball, is a big risk. And I think in defensive areas against Port Vale, who are going to be a physical team, obviously in League One, you're going to see more of that in teams like Newcastle, which could be a worry. So maybe don't give him the ball in these high octane situations. Now, what I will say about that, though, with the Newcastle game in mind, is that Arsenal probably won't have the ball a huge amount. Like, we will have it maybe 50-50 or maybe 60-40 to Newcastle. I think Newcastle will go into the game wanting to have the ball, when Arsenal will probably allow them to have it at times. I think Nwaneri actually isn't being used as a counter-attacking player and is being used as a player on the ball for Arsenal. I think a lot of that comes down to the pressing. A lot of it comes down to his engagement on tackles, of when he needs to go, when he needs not to. But I think he's been learning that broadly. There is issues there, but I don't think with a Woklz and Marino up front, it really matters, especially when you don't do anything on the ball if you're winning it back every time. So it's about that risk. You know, you're going to have to risk that the press might not be perfect and there might be mistakes there, but ultimately you will be able to do more on the ball. And I don't mind some games Marino playing to give him that option in there, but I think against Newcastle, it's quite clear that we need to just try something different. We always match up physically with them, and that's why you see people like Marino play and all these other players play, which is fine usually, but without any two-way players being Odegaard and Havertz in the team, and they are perfect players for this game admittedly, but they're not here, I just want us to have a little bit more technical quality, which I think Nwaneri brings, and he is more of a natural fit to this right centre mid. Eze not really been familiar with the right centre mid, even though I'd still love Eze there, but I personally I'd rather him just play on the left. If he's on the pitch, I'm fine with it. And with Marino being the option they keep going for, I can't defend that. I think there's certain games that Marino makes sense, like Liverpool. I do think Marino made sense for that. I don't think he necessarily made sense for the City game, and I've said this for multiple weeks in a row. So I'm just hoping that against Newcastle, even though he might make more sense in physical wise, it hasn't made any difference in the past. So just please maybe rely on Ethan, or at least give Ethan a half or something before he kind of dies out, because this is a thing with Ethan. He doesn't play a great 90 minutes, plays a great like 60 minutes, and then that's probably it, which is absolutely fine at the moment. But overall in the comments, let me know what you guys think about Ethan Nwaneri. Do you think he should come into the Arsenal team? I think he should definitely be an option and be given more time. And even if we've got some injuries on the right wing, if Saka picks up another one in the future, I think Ethan should be tried there. This guy isn't that bad. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one.